The sitting is resumed. Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Mr. President. Difficult to come as the first speaker after lunch. After lunch was so good. The good salt fish and cuckoo, which I do enjoy. Yeah, but it's difficult to keep people's attention after that, sir. So I'll do my best and to be brief. First of all, let me join in congratulating all of those new members of the Chamber. You've been sentenced to serve with the rest of us who have been resentenced. As at the end of the day, this is certainly a duty that we all perform. So I am very pleased to welcome the new members and to see the familiar faces back. And I look forward to working with you all. And Mr. President, let me extend my congratulations to you as well for your re-election as the President. And join with Reverend Rogers, my good friend, and to say that, to thank the President, Most Honourable Jeffrey Bostick, in reappointing me and having the faith, and I trust it will not be misplaced. I shall do my best. So, sir, on this occasion, the constitutional amendment before us, much of what I was going to say, and I probably will still say, has been said by Senator Rogers. And there really was three things I wanted to say. First one was, why now? And perhaps after I've thought about it for a while, I have an answer for what the why now might be. And why now can be broken down into a few pieces. What mischief are we addressing by making this change to the Constitution? Why now also led me to think, and what is the most important thing that I would want to do, sir, right after this third 30-love winning of the election? Would this have been it? Why is this the number one priority? The second question that I would ask when looking at this is, or perhaps maybe not the second question, but maybe the second thing I would say is, in reading this, fundamentally we are adding three ways that a seat becomes vacant in the House of Parliament, the lower house, the other place. Resignation, expulsion, and crossing the floor. Expelled from the party, resignation from the party, or crossing the floor. Third thing I would like to speak to is the fact that we have a Constitution Reform Commission, or we had, and it issued its report. And as I will quote from a little bit later on, this particular provision was considered, but it was not recommended by the Constitution Reform Commission. But perhaps the situation is different now than it was then, when they considered it and debated it at that time. And that would lead us back to the why now. But the fundamental question that this particular amendment addresses, I think, is whether or not a person who is elected in their personal capacity, or are they elected on the party mandate? That's the fundamental question, and the only difference here that we're dealing with as I see it. And as you know, sir, I can't help but take a business approach. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer to this. I'm an accountant like you. I'm a quantity surveyor, or evaluation surveyor, and I'm a computer scientist. Those are the three things that I am qualified in. I am certainly not qualified in law, and this is for the legal scholars to deal with. But perhaps the approach that I take from a business point of view is I look at this and say, well, what does the law really say? The amendment say? And perhaps what are the unintended, I don't want to call it consequences, but perhaps, or the unhighlighted consequences of this. The first one that's jumped out at me was the expulsion of an individual of a member of a political party becomes a powerful weapon against internal dissent within that party. And that troubled me. That troubled me. Because what we do not want to create is what is often referred to as an echo chamber. don't want an echo chamber within the House of Parliament, within that lower house. We want robust debate. Whether that debate sometimes comes from across the floor, maybe comes from within itself. And is it not even more important, sir, when you have the third 30 Love mandate, that you ask for this type of robust debate and you do not thwart it with perhaps the threat of expulsion? Perhaps this legislation or this amendment to the Constitution will reduce what I would call conscious voting, where individuals search their own conscience and vote based upon that as opposed to being based upon the party. But I have been told that expulsion is a serious matter. It's not taken lightly, and there's all kinds of due process with it, and there's all kinds of recourse to the courts, etc. And that is true within an organization that has a robust set of rules. But those robust set of rules, as Senator Rogers pointed out, they are unknown to the Constitution. You can set them all on your own. And my particular example I would give today, maybe this is frivolous and maybe it's a bit of a joke, but I'm also being serious. Perhaps, sir, within the Constitution of my party, whatever that party is that I belong to, perhaps one day we decide that wearing pink pantsuits on Fridays is grounds for expulsion.
Yes.
We could decide that, sir,
Yes.
because that's what our party says. That's one of our rules.
Yes.
And if we have that as a rule, then you will be expelled.
You'll get part from that.
So we have to be careful, because expulsion from the party triggers the loss of the seat. And as Senator Rogers said, that is significant. Significant. And I'm not sure that our Constitution contemplated that. Now, if something like this did happen, whether it be for resignation, crossing the floor, or for expulsion, we have to recognize that these constituents who elected that person, they lose representation for perhaps an extended period. I've heard that the courts will deal with these matters expeditiously, and I understand that there's been evidence in the past of that actually happening, but there's no guarantee that it will happen. We could have built in to this amendment, given a specific amount of time in order to adjudicate. The 14 days, sir, is for you to go to the court. The court has no limitation as to how long before they rule. So that seat, immediately, you can't function in that seat, and until the court has ruled, you could have a situation where those constituents are without representation for a long time. In some other jurisdictions, they actually limit it, say the court must give a ruling within 60 days. Now, the third thing on this is the crossing of the floor. Now, I am not a politician, and I've said that over and over again, and that should be abundantly clear to everyone in here. I have no political affiliation at all. In fact, I think the political affiliation that I have is party in power. That's who I have to work with. That's how it works with the business community. Someone else chooses who is going to be in power, and then we work with whoever is in power. But crossing the floor, I heard in the other place the Prime Minister say this did not need to be explained. But maybe it doesn't need to be explained to some people. For me, I thought it would have been useful for it to be explained and be more laid out clearly what it was. Because if in fact it is so well understood, it would have been easy then to actually have articulated it within this same piece of legislation. And I'm worried that there could be arguments over what constitutes crossing the floor, because while it might be well understood, it certainly is not in writing anywhere. So I would not want to see a problem and any ambiguity around that. The other thing that worried me a little bit when I read this, and it has been explained to me, sir, that perhaps my fears are not well placed, was that the Speaker, who we have recently, within the last few months, made an independent person who is not a member of Parliament, elected member of Parliament. I'm a bit worried that we are putting the Speaker into a politically explosive situation, let's call it that. What I understand is that the declaration that is made by the leader of the House of the Parliamentary Business of the party of the candidate who was elected the member, I had to read that, sir, there's a lot, it's quite a mouthful. Once that declaration is made, the Speaker, following procedure, must trigger the vacancy. I am concerned that the act of creating this vacancy is done by the Speaker. It's not done by the party itself. The party simply only declares. And it may only be words, and as I said earlier, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that we may be putting the Speaker into a very contentious position there. Because the Speaker must take note of the notification, but what if he doesn't declare based upon that notification? The amendment, sir, also creates a possibility of, let's call it, engineered vacancies. So if a party believes that they could win a by-election and they don't particularly want a particular candidate, that would be a good time to do something about it. And that would be called an engineered vacancy. And I'm a bit worried that that is now created. And all of these things, though, I'm going to come back to. Remember what I said, what's the mischief that we're seeking to solve? Because sometimes you have to choose the lesser of two evils. Sometimes you have to do that. And maybe there's a bigger evil out there that we haven't yet looked at. Other thing that it doesn't address, that I was hoping that perhaps something like this, which if we spent a bit more time talking about, maybe we would address it. What about when parties split? And I believe in our history, and I am no expert on it, but there are others in this room who might be. I believe there was a time when there were 3 or 4 members of one party that split off and did their own party. I think it may have been the NDP at the time. It was Richie Haynes and so on. So this doesn't deal with that at all, because if you have a split, which one is the real party? I don't know. I don't know how it would deal with if it's more than one person crossing the floor. If 3 or 4 split, what happens? The other thing that this doesn't address is that it specifically is speaking to if you are elected on one party's platform and you leave that and become an independent or go to another party, and there's been great discussion, I think Senator Slocum explained that quite well as to good reasons why that should in fact trigger. You've done all of these different things, as has been explained to me. You put yourself forward as a candidate for that party. That party within the little constituency it had, it said, yes, we choose you. And then you who were chosen go up to the bigger executive committee party, say, yes, we would like you. And then they throw their weight behind you. And you get all the benefit of everything they're doing. And you sign their manifesto. And you go to the polls and you're elected. To simply say that you can cross the floor after that or change and say disassociate yourself with the manifesto that you have signed on to certainly is a significant event. And as I said, Senator Slocum did a much better job of explaining that than I could. But it might come to pass that in Barbados, someone is an independent is elected. What happens when an independent then joins a party? Is that a triggering event here? Because that hasn't been talked about. What if you're elected as an independent and then you say, I really like Senator Sinclair's Democratic Labour Party, Barbados Labour Party, and I would like to join them. Is that a triggering event? Because that's the same thing. You're changing political associations at that point in time, but it has not been.
He has to be expelled by himself.
Well, no, he joins another party, so that treats to the independence. So there are a bunch of other things that could have been considered in this amendment that perhaps would have made it a bit more robust. So I come back to, and maybe before I go there, let me just also quote from, I believe, sir, the report of the Constitutional Reform Commission has been laid in here as an official document, so I think I would be within my rights to quote from it. And I would say that on page 27 and continuing on page 28 of that document, and I quote, it says, the Commission discussed but did not ultimately agree to recommended provisions for the recall of MPs or restrictions on them crossing the floor. In either case, the majority felt that the essence of representative democracy was the people elect their MPs at periodic general elections with a mandate to represent them, and thus MPs must have the ability during the parliamentary term to act as necessary in pursuit of that mandate. I note, sir, that members of that commission are also members here now. Senator Rogers is a member of that commission. Senator Redmond, also a member of that commission. So that's the opinion. I don't know if they were part of there wasn't a dissent in it. Apparently it was not, it was considered, but it was not agreed. I don't know what that means exactly. In the other place, of course, Member of Parliament Gregory Nichols was also a member of that. So, sir, my conclusions on this would be, come back to why now? Why now? And maybe before I address that, I will use this occasion to share with you, sir, and the Chamber, what would have been my top 10 things if I had had the opportunity to deal with it. And I was going to deal with those top 10 things urgently. And I sat in here with you, sir, at the first sitting of this Senate, and we heard for the first time, I don't know if it's still called a throne speech, but the President's speech. And it digressed from what it normally did, because I would normally hear words like my government says, and my, it says, well, those are not things that we say. The President told us what he thought was his priorities. It was rather refreshing what his thoughts were. So I thought I would share with you, sir, what my priorities would be. And perhaps the first one is going to come as a surprise to all, and maybe get me in trouble, as I like to do, apparently. What I would tell you is, right now, in my opinion, the world order has changed. And we need to recognize that. And what one of our national heroes, I think, is that correct? Errol Barrett? The Honourable? Yeah, get all the things correct. Right. The right, excellent, thank you. He said, and I think I have this right, is that we were friends of all and satellites of none. Sir, the world order has changed, and my number one thing might be to look at that carefully and see, can we continue to exist with that as our motto? Or do we need to pick sides? And I think that we're seeing around the Caribbean, people are picking sides. And that might be the new world order. So number one would be, I would take a look at that. Number two is crime, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, so I'll rattle through it. Number three is indiscipline within our society, which is partly linked to the crime. Number four, private sector reform. I have heard of this for as long as I have been an adult. Public sector, thank you, public sector. Private too. And I would have completely agree with both private and public sector, so thank you. I've adjusted my number four to say that. Because we need to recognize that while we are trying to reform, we actually need to revolutionize. Artificial intelligence is changing the way that we do business daily, and we are playing catch up with 20-year-ago stuff. Sir, I can tell you my own experience. I digress for another couple of minutes to share some with you. As you know, sir, I serve as a judge, let's call it, stewards is what we call it, in Formula One, in the racing world. And this weekend I will leave, tomorrow, I will leave to go to the first race of the year. For the first time, what will I be doing? I will be using all of the regulations, all of the guidelines for penalties. The artificial intelligence will be watching the race. It will tell me when they think an infringement has occurred. Of course, I have the final decision, but it's going to help greatly in how quickly, how accurately that I am doing things. And when I could give you 50 different examples within my own business that we're adopting artificial intelligence at a rate that is significant. So when I add number four here, private and public sector revolution, that would be at the top of my agenda. Tax simplification would be at the top of my agenda. Facilitation versus frustration We don't want me to talk about the F words here again, those two F words. Certainly don't want me to move on to the C words as I do from time to time and talk about concessions versus corruption. I would look at a national service program, sir, for those who are leaving school and are not academically inclined and are not perhaps going to the trade schools and so on. I would look for some type of national service program. As I've said in here, sir, before, I would look towards free public transportation as part of the solution to the congestion on the roads. I would look at our infrastructure, our airport, our port, our roads, our water, our sewage systems. And on the 10th, and it could be in any order you want, because they're all equally important, is our healthcare system. So that would be, for me, what I would do now. But why are we in such a hurry with this particular one? And I would like to maybe throw out something here to the group that maybe has not been said, or maybe others have said it and I didn't understand when they said it. But sir, I think this amendment would likely strengthen an opposition and not weaken it. I suspect that had we had this amendment prior to the elections, we might have actually had an opposition. I think that the reality is, knowing that you can just simply move from one to the other gives you some comfort. But if you know that that's not so, you knew it in advance, I put forward to you, sir, that that might actually strengthen our democratic process, and it might strengthen the fact we might actually have had a few people in opposition. I don't think it might have changed, in my opinion, from what I can see. I don't think it would have changed the overall outcome, but I was surprised certainly at what it was. So, sir, why now is the question I started at the beginning. Why in such a hurry? Why digress from the recommendations that have been put forward? That's how I would answer that question, because we cannot in this country afford another 30 Love. We need a robust opposition, and in a two-party system with the other side so darn weak, so weak it seems, excuse my language there, I think that this perhaps as an alternative opinion, because I cannot disagree with anything that Senator Rogers said, but perhaps I might be different in the conclusion that I come to at the end, which is to say that there maybe the lesser of two evils is the way that I might have to reconcile it within my heart and head, that perhaps that is what we would do. So, sir, with those few words on this very important matter, I am much obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Maladu. Speakers, Senator Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to take this time to congratulate, first of all, myself for being a senator. And then I would like to congratulate all the other senators who are in the House today. Mr. President, I came to begin my presentation with a quote. I don't have it here documented, but I have it in my memory. And that quote is by Shakespeare. And that quote states, "There's nothing good or bad, but it's the thinking that makes it so." So the basis of that submission is to state that your perception will shape your reality. But of course, when we are dealing with the Constitution Amendment Bill of 2026, we have to carefully scrutinize it, and we are not just dealing with perception. This is a reality today, sir. And it has caused a lot of national debate in the country because, of course, the Constitution is the framework of the land. And if we are going to amend it, we have to ensure, sir, Mr. President, that democracy is upheld and that the fundamental rights and the freedoms of the people of Barbados that they have enjoyed for so long will not be taken from them or infringed. So as I reflect with that quote, I remind every senator and every citizen of this country that legislation must be properly scrutinized and it should be proportional and well justified when it is to be implemented, sir. So, sir, my integrity compels me to ask certain questions today. Because, of course, we know that there's a buzz on the floor going around that if an elected candidate who sits in this parliament does cross the floor, there goes me. But my political survival doesn't bother me with my statements today. I have to do what I have to do in terms of my integrity. So, sir, I'm going to ask these questions. And the questions that I want to ask are these. What is the benefit of this legislation at this time? What is the benefit of the bill? Because anytime a bill is to be passed, we must first look at the benefit of the bill on the rights of the citizens. Second question, what are the potential harms to the people of Barbados? So the third question is, what improvements can be made to increase the benefits or limit or remove the harms? And sir, I know that there are benefits when we think about anti-defection laws, because the whole idea is that when elected candidates are campaigning, they campaign under the banner of a party. And while they campaign under the banner of a party, there's a manifesto. And this manifesto they would agree to. And the manifesto is not just a fancy decoration. The manifesto comes like a covenant. Yes? So, as they agree to this manifesto, and then perhaps later decide they don't agree with it, or they want to cross the floor, then it would appear to the public that they have betrayed that said manifesto which they had agreed to. And even during my campaign, Mr. President, I was one who said, I am not opposed to the idea of anti-defection laws in principle. But I go deeper than that, because though I understand that there's voter apathy in the country, and people would pretty much agree that when members continuously cross the floor, it could, cause some voter apathy. But I want to add to that, that even though such legislation could compel members to stick to the manifesto and stick under that banner, I'm saying, if we are saying that they are to stick to the manifesto, just so that then there's democratic accountability. So I understand, yes. So I understand, yes, that this piece of legislation, sir, is to ensure political stability. But again, sir, that doesn't mean that I'm arguing for it. That means that I'm scrutinizing it and looking at the benefit that is attached through this amendment. So now, sir, I have to look at the potential harms, because that is one benefit that I mentioned. But now, let's look at the potential harms. when I go to this insertion of section 45D into the Constitution, sir, we know already that a member of Parliament could lose their seat. They lose their seat and they could be expelled. And that leads me to the question of, would that put a fear in that person, in that individual? Would that person freely exercise freedom of conscience, sir? Because here, we are basically, if this amendment is passed, we are basically allowing then that this individual who was a candidate, an elected candidate in a political party, that they could be restricted, they could be expelled. And sir, I think that it is punitive and it is a harsh dose of reality. So sir, Mr. President, Section 45D raises a serious concern, and it should to the minds of the people. I want to turn now to the Constitution of Barbados, and I want to remind Barbadians that Section 11, may I state it, sir? It says, whereas every person, and this is from Chapter 3 of the Constitution, Section 11 of that chapter, the chapter that is one that is universally accepted already in this country, Mr. President. It says, whereas every person in Barbados is entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, that is to say, the right, whatever his race, place of origin, political opinions. So he has a right, he or she has a right to political opinion. And that is to be enjoyed. That is not to be snatched away, even by an amendment, Mr. President. And as you see at subsection D, freedom of conscience, of expression, and of assembly and association. And sir, a member of Parliament should enjoy freedom of association. They should enjoy having political opinion. Now I take you to Section 21 of the Constitution. Section 21 reads as follows: except with his own consent, no person shall be hindered in the enjoyment of his freedom of assembly and association. That is to say, his right to assemble freely and associate with other persons, and in particular, to form or belong to political parties, or to form or belong to trade unions or other associations for the protection of his interests. Mr. President, this means that this is a right in the Constitution, which is the guiding light, the guiding principle for society. And if there is an amendment that will pass in this honorable House, sir, we definitely have to ensure that this right that citizens have enjoyed for years, thousands of years, is not affected. Because you see, sir, further to this, the Parliamentary Commission Reform Report, I don't have the copy in my hand, that report stated that we should remain the same. They are not going to restrict. They did not agree with restricting an individual from crossing the floor. And Mr. President, we know that crossing the floor is not anything new to Barbadians, because we know that the late Honourable Errol Walton Barrow, he would have crossed the floor, all dated back to 1951, when he had joined the Barbados Labour Party, and thereafter he had crossed. And as Senator Cummings did mention earlier, we know that Mr. Thorne did cross the floor. So that leads me to really ask a question here in Barbados too. Do we really suffer that much from political instability? Or is it that we just have had some instances where individuals had crossed the floor, and then now we are contemplating an amendment to the Constitution, an amendment as such that I would be polite and say it seems rushed. It seems as though we are moving swiftly and in a hurry without proper justification. I hope that don't offend the bees for me saying that, but we are rushing and we are moving quickly, but we must uphold democracy. Sir, I want to state that right now in Barbados, the Constitution is premised on an election of an individual. Our Constitution, Mr. President, is not recognizing political parties. So I'm here wondering to myself then, if such a bill is passed, the implementation of that bill would have to be for the next general election perhaps, just so to make it properly justified, I would say. Because when members of society were going to vote and they went to cast their ballot, they voted for the individual. So despite the idea that culturally people vote for a party, what I'm saying is that legally, to the individual, they vote for individuals. So we can't just say culturally you vote for a party with the Constitution don't even recognize political parties in that way, sir. So this will have to be implemented after the next election so that people know what they were getting themselves into, and they know that they were voting for a party and not an individual. Just as magistrates are creatures of statute, sir, I must uphold the law. I am not a magistrate, but I must uphold the law and read it as it is. I must not put my own opinion in there. If I have to interpret it, I will interpret it properly for the citizens of the country. So, sir, the real question to me too isn't whether the bill could be amended, because I know that it takes majority. So a piece of legislation has the possibility of being passed once you have the majority. But the real question, Mr. President, is how unethical it would be to pass this bill knowing fully well that it could affect the rights of the citizens in the country. Because I know, sir, that the argument on the other side with the government, they will say, we are ensuring political stability, we are upholding democracy, but still, we have to ensure, sir, that when an individual is expelled, that element of things is not abused by political parties. Because we cannot allow the elected candidate who decides to defect or cross the floor to be abused, and we cannot allow political parties to weaponize it. So when we consider these matters, sir, as a lawyer, I would say, I would recommend that there should be certain amendments made and room for reform so that perhaps the legislation will not be vague in any way, will not be conflicting or ambiguous in any form or fashion, sir. And I would give my recommendations to, sir, because I believe that crossing the floor should be properly defined, and that is one. Because one, as I said before, may think that crossing the floor means one thing, and crossing the floor may mean something else in another country. So crossing the floor in Barbados, I can't hear, sir.
No one is speaking. You're the only one speaking, Senator. Please press on. Please press on.
Oh, yes, you distract
Just
me.
ignore those who may be thinking aloud.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Always an honor and pleasure. And I know I have my friend over there encouraging me.
Just adjust the chair,
some
please.
good points, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, even political parties should be acknowledged in the Constitution and properly defined, sir. Because it's not about political opinion, it is about fairness. It is about adherence to the rule of law, sir. So taking our minds back to that section 21 and section 11, I would recommend, sir, that if the rights of the people are going to be infringed upon, that then we rethink this piece of legislation. Sir, I want to bring to your mind this. If perhaps then we have a party that forms a coalition, who then will be the leader? Those are things that I find were not maximized or mentioned. Well, actually, it was not even mentioned in this bill. What I noted too that I don't want to forget, sir, even the typographical errors that I have seen, 2 full stops, sir, in that section. Even, sir, the fact that the word "the" should be "that." All of that will make me think as though it is rushed. And not only that, I know that with typographical errors, sir, of course, once the legislative intention is clear, then we can move on from that, sir. But I put it in my submission either way. Further, when we are contemplating members crossing the floor, sir, we have to also recognize that when it comes to freedom of association, there's a condition there. So if you cross the floor, for sure, we know that there would be a by-election. That's the hope. But that means, sir, that we are only contemplating that probably one person would cross the floor? Wouldn't it be strenuous if 4 or 5 persons cross the floor? Are we insinuating that we will have at least 5 by-elections? Wouldn't that be strenuous on our people? I leave that there, sir. So, sir, I do believe, sir, that this bill in itself could cause a member of parliament to limit themselves in debate, especially when we are thinking about a member being expelled, sir. So a person in their mind may wonder, do I choose between what I believe in and risk being expelled? So it limits parliamentary debate. And one thing I am sure is that in democracy, we want to ensure there's still parliamentary independence. We want to ensure that members feel as though they can exercise freedom of conscience, sir. So although people will look at this bill and say this bill is short and it gets to the point, that is not so, sir. Something could be very short, but still impactful. And I wouldn't even have mind if it had just spoke about crossing the floor, but then there's that factor of expulsion. And still, I have heard complaints of society. And the citizens wonder too, if the 14-day period for a member of parliament who have been affected by this amendment, by defection, sorry, if that 14-day period is sufficient or not. And sir, I know that in the court of law, one can be granted extension of time, but I would prefer if it is set out in the bill, given that judicial discretion, so that if an individual for some reason who is aggrieved cannot within the 14 days of time bring the matter to court, that they will be given that opportunity, Mr. President, still to be heard. So, Mr. President, I will surmise myself, because I like to get straight to the point, Mr. President. Number one, Mr. President, we look to the benefits, and sometimes when I talked about the benefits of compelling a party, an individual to stick to their manifesto, we know that sometimes parties do not even stick to their own manifesto. It happens, sir. So that is only one benefit, of course, and then we look at the political stability that can come. But Barbados, I would say, hasn't proven that it really suffered from political instability. And then one of the harms, sir, I reiterate, that members who get expelled, there's the possibility for them to be weaponized by the political parties, or God forbid the leader. And there's still that possibility because the legislation doesn't tell you how they can be protected from that. It doesn't state, Mr. President. And if we are to consider passing a piece of legislation as such, knowing full well that it has its consequences to affect the fundamental rights and freedoms that have been enjoyed for so long by Barbadians, then we must make the necessary amendments and make sure that the provisions will state what are the protections for those individuals who were affected by resigning, by being expelled, or by crossing the floor. Because, sir, we want to ensure that these members still have freedom of conscience. These members don't just go along saying yes to everything in Parliament because they feel as though dissent is limited and they cannot oppose. We still have to protect them because I know, sir, that some will vote yes. But we have to think outside of that box, that even if some vote yes, there have people like myself who will want to be an elected individual or candidate at some point of time to serve. And it means that I can be affected or another citizen in the country can be affected if we choose to cross the floor or to resign, or if we are expelled, have to vacate the seat. All of those years some people had with experience, just like Honourable, the late Errol Walton Barrow. And then, there you go, you lose your seat. Sir, I will urge this Honourable House to consider my submission seriously in light of Section 11 of the Constitution and in light of Section 21. I don't think that I have to go very much further because there are so many things that we can pick at, but we must pull at the things that threaten democracy in the country. We must look at what can threaten our democracy, and that is where we should start. And that is where we should make our decisions, upholding public interests and wondering to ourselves if the benefits really outweigh the harms, or the harms, sir, outweigh the benefits. And that is my submission, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Goodrich. Speakers? If there are no speakers, let's wrap up. Senators, the Honourable Christopher Sinclair.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me save you the duty of having to wrap up right now. And I hope I don't delay too long. In fact, I don't intend to really. First of all, Mr. President, let me express on my own personal behalf my personal thanks to the Honourable Prime Minister for affording me the opportunity to be here in this part of the Parliament building. As a youngster in politics, and I've been around a little while, I actually came into this building the first time in 1991. Well, let me put it this way. I came into the building as an employee, as the then personal assistant to the late, Erskine Sandiford, then Prime Minister, late Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford in 1991. But I visited Parliament a lot of times before 1991. So I shouldn't say it is the first time I came in. The first time I came in as an employee or a functionary. And so I've been around for quite a bit of time. And as a youngster coming up and having aspirations in politics, it was always my intention when I come up the steps of Parliament to turn left and never really to turn right. Indeed, to turn left happened in 1990, in 2008, when I was elected as Member of Parliament for the other place, representing the constituency of St. Michael Northwest, as MP. On this occasion, I came up the steps and almost turned left. But I had to be reminded that it is now my state to turn right. And as I told the Clerk of Parliament, I pushed every door because I couldn't remember which one was the door to get into the Senate. But I eventually found my way here, and I'm happy to be here. I think it's a different type of experience for me, of course, not the one that I imagined I would have been for some period of time, longer than I was, but I am grateful for the opportunity as given by the Prime Minister to serve in the Senate, and of course, by virtue of this, to be a member of the Cabinet and to serve as the Senior Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Having been around for a bit of time, you come to not be surprised by anything not to be too surprised by anything in politics. They always say a day in politics is a very long time. Things change, people change, circumstances change. And we understand that. That's how the nature of life is. It is not intended to be a juggernaut, to stay constant ever. There are seasons. And changes happen, and people change as well. In my previous incarnation in here, in this chamber, in the House, in the Parliament, I served as a member under the banner of the Democratic Labour Party. I lost my seat in 2018, as you know, and I went on to do other things. Fortunately, I was able to do other things other than politics. And I know how difficult a life it is when you're in politics without a specific profession like a lawyer or a doctor or even a priest, and have to go out into opposition. I did that twice, in 1994 and again in 2018. It is not an easy existence, but fortunately for me, I was able, through certain skills and knowledge sets which I have, to be able to function outside of politics and to be able to come back in on this occasion as well. And so I kind of understand, or have an appreciation, let me say, for why we would have a matter of this nature before us. We use the term, and I heard people calling for it to be defined, crossing the floor. Crossing the floor, as I understand it from my training in political science, is a very specific kind of action, very specific activity. Not just here, but all over the world where parliaments are convened or houses of legislature are convened. And it is much different from changing organizations or changing parties. And I will speak about parties because I think, as a person who has been a member of parties, I really feel I should make a point later on that. But it is distinct from changing parties. I heard my esteemed colleague, Senator Goodrich, speaking about Errol Barrow. Errol Barrow did not cross the floor. Errol Walton Barrow left the Barbados Labour Party and started a political party. So he didn't cross the floor. Chris Nicola didn't cross the floor either, by the way. I didn't cross the floor because I was not on any floor to cross. The public saw to that. I was not on any floor. I changed political allegiances, and with good cause, which I will not go into right now. But
you will.
At the appropriate time, but not today. I didn't cross the floor either. So there's a difference. Crossing the floor, in the context in which we operate, in this Westminster, derivative of the Westminster liberal democratic system, Westminster Whitehall system that we have here in Barbados, is so designated that you are elected under a particular party banner as a member of the parliament, that is the elected legislature, and you, for whatever reasons, good, bad, or indifferent, for your own personal choice, choose to switch allegiances and go to another side. Now, in the context of Parliament, since Parliament does not necessarily recognize parties, it is said that you have, if you are in the government, you have switched from being loyal to the government or the administration in majority to the opposition, or those who are not in favor of the government. That may be in a political party, or it may very well be as an independent, because you can sit as an independent and not support the thing. So in the context of the House, that is how it is laid out, because Parliament does not recognize parties in that sense. And we know of examples of that. For example, Senator Thompson and Senator Farley, who have been around just as long as I have been or longer, will tell you, for example, between, I think it was 1982 and 1986, the late Don Blackman did not cross the floor, did not switch political allegiances, but sat very quietly on the opposition benches when it was the best kept secret in Barbados that he was not in favor of the party in which he was associated. Now, Dr. Blackman was of, superior political vintage. And so I think he understood the historical significance of, and he spent a lot of time in the United States as well, so he understood the historical and philosophical importance of not so rattling the cage as to crossing the floor in the middle of an elected term of office when you ran under the banner of a political party. So even though it was common knowledge that he was not necessarily in support of what the administration was doing, he neither said by voice, in rancor, or in desperation. Or rhetoric, yes, better use of word. That he would, break up the thing and cross the floor and join Barrow and the Dems. But people might have known that he was having tea with Barrow at some point in time. When the elections were called and the parliament was dissolved, he declared his hand. And you can really look at that and say, that is an example. That is an example of how political separation for elected members could be. Now, people have different ways of doing different things because, we are all different people. The only place you have unanimity is, the Honourable Senator Rogers would tell you, is in a cemetery or a morgue. Being different people, you do different things differently. But that, I think, was a stunning example of how the practice, the idealism, the practice of Westminster liberal democratic politics can take place in a manner in which you respect the traditions of that system. We complain in Barbados about young people having no respect for elderly, having no respect for convention, having no respect for this, having no respect for that. But yet we kind of essay to move away when it comes to adults, professionals, acting in certain ways. Because we like to condemn on the one hand, but justify on the other. Yeah? Very dangerous thing to do precisely in this kind of environment. right? When a person presents themselves to a political party, I believe both parties do it now. It wasn't done as much perhaps in the past, but they now do it. We do interviews, we do screenings, some have psychoanalysis, and a very good thing too. Because you can butt up on some fairly strange people who present themselves to be elected as candidates, as representatives. So parties go through a certain rigor. And you know why I'm saying parties? I'm saying this for my friend Keanu Rogers, because he gave a presentation that put me on pause. I'm not going to say I take umbrage, because that's too powerful a word to use on this occasion. But it put me on pause. Because the way he was speaking, it was as if a political party was some kind of band of disorganized characters who cobbled themselves together in pursuit of something called office. I'm not going to say that. But you get the point that I'm making. Political parties, I don't know anywhere else in the world, but I know in the Caribbean, political parties are seminal institutions that have contributed to the development of our societies in ways unimaginable from the 1930s and onwards. We know the representations and to the Moyne Commission and all the other commissions thereafter about what was absent in Barbados following the riots of 1937 and the emergence of a workers' movement and trade unions, and out of trade unions came political parties. Well, out of political parties came trade unions. And I can tell you that without that ethos, that movement of social advancement relative to the political dynamics for the working class in Barbados, through what we call political parties in Barbados, a lot of things that we enjoy today, frankly, would not be available. The middle class that you see out here in Barbados, the teachers, the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, the advancements of the working class, the social upward mobility that we see in Barbados and enjoy in Barbados today are largely because the existence of political parties. So political parties is not some cobbled together group of people who believe that they can change the world for whatever reason, that they can just be existing. And this kind of flippance, I didn't say that you were flippant, but this kind of flippance that I hear in Barbados, that you hear around the place about political parties, they're not perfect, they're not ideal, they're flawed. But they're flawed like many other institutions, like the private sector. But you know, the private sector don't ever admit that they're flawed. They do not ever admit that they're flawed. And they're not scrutinized. And they're not scrutinized either. But you know, they always talk about political parties and politicians and this and that and the next. Fair enough, no problem. I have no problem with that. That's okay. But I'll tell you that I know that if the private sector contributed, and they have contributed mightily to the development of Barbados, and will continue to do so, hopefully, working in conjunction, as Senator Molyneux so sneakily said, I am for the party in power because somebody elected them and I have to work with them. Well,
Senator Sinclair, in the context of what you're saying, to suggest, first of all, this is a public space, so you can't sneak and say anything. I thought that he trumpeted what he was saying, and I want you to withdraw this.
Then I will withdraw that word.
As Senator Molyneux said.
Cheekily. Well, in passing, let me put it this way. Let me say, nonchalantly, say, he used better parliamentary language. She just said it. But I'll make the point. All the same. Huh? Yes, of course. course, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the point that I am making is just as that is true. I'm not criticizing you, but the senator don't get all worked up. I'm not criticizing you for it. I am saying just as you say that you work with the party in power, the party in power has to work with the private sector too. So there's no profundity of the statement, and I do not take offense to it. That's the point I was making. I wasn't criticizing you in that particular regard. Precisely. Huh? So the fact of the matter is that, and I want to make this point, really, I wanted to emphasize that point. We cannot just dismiss political parties. It's not a flick down the leg side or an edge in the slits. They are long-standing national institutions. And some people seem to believe that you can pick up a document called a constitution, and because the constitution does not recognize political parties, you are going to advance an argument that political parties don't matter, or that they don't matter sufficiently. That is false. I don't want to call it nonsense, because that is to reflect negatively on people, and I'm not in that kind of space anymore. But it is not true. Political parties are in the system. And you know one thing, I'm not a lawyer either, but one thing I know about law is that law cannot be so written to express every single intent and view as intended or as come to your head. Some things have to go by interpretation. But the Honourable Senator Rogers will tell you, he's the man of the Bible. And there are many things that he... These are of the church. He is a respected theologian. He's a respected theologian. So he knows that many things in the Bible people complain about are contradictory. Some things they say are not explained. And that is why we require spiritual leadership from people such as the Honourable Senator to help and guide people. That is why we have an Attorney General. That's why we have lawyers. So everything is not going to be written in a constitution, but because it's not written in a constitution, I'll tell you there's something called convention and practice. I'm not a lawyer, but I know there's something called convention and practice, and the convention around here is that political parties have put up candidates in elections to be elected under a banner. And you cannot pretend that that does not exist, because that is part of our cultural, political, social, and economic reality. So it comes now to this issue about whether or not you're elected as an individual, and so you run on the party banner. You're elected as an individual, and because voters, X amount of voters in Y constituency voted for you, you are now unleashed on the rest of the world to do as you please, only subject to the people in that constituency who can only extricate you
Next 5 years.
the next 5 years. Or when election comes. That's you know, there's a particular, that's an interesting brand of sophistry that I do not support. I think I've been around here a long time. If people, you know, we know why people say this, because they do not understand what really goes into running an election and getting people elected. You know. There's a whole lot of it. I know the pollsters, and Senator Slocum made this point, and I think he knows it because he practices around the Caribbean on these matters. You know, when pollsters do polls, one of the things we look for when we look at the polls, we look to see how the leader is performing, how the party is performing, and how the candidate is performing. And you know, invariably, when you look at it, in many, many, many cases, the leader of the party, unfortunately, that didn't happen with the Democratic Labour Party in the last election. But ordinarily, the leader tends to poll ahead of both party and candidate. And then the party polls second. And then you have the individuals. On very few and rare occasions do you have any candidate who polls better than their leader or their political party.
Definitely not in this one.
So who it is? And parties, as Senator Slocum said, parties arrange their business, their strategies around how those things are done. So when people talk about individual candidates, if 99% of the candidates who ran in the last election had to run as independents, I don't think many of them would have made it in that chamber in the other side. And the kind of things that go into ensuring that and this is not to say that candidates don't have value, they all have value. And a lot of them show that good value when they're elected. But they're elected as part of something. They belong to a structure, a machinery. And if you want to know how party machinery really works, call a by-election. Senator Thompson would tell you. The president would tell you. When the cavalry roll in for a by-election, I mean, you have candidates. You have candidates. So you name candidates. Candidate A and candidate B for party, D and party E. But when the cavalry rolls in on a by-election, that is when you really see how political parties are. The candidate is just a candidate, but you see an infrastructure. The power of the infrastructure, that machinery. It's dispersed among 30 constituencies. Perhaps you don't see it as much except when you go to, big meetings and all of that kind of thing. But when you're in a constituency and you see that machine, you understand why it is that people support political parties as opposed to individuals. And so you are elected to the House. You come in, and you know what? Really? Who spins a lot of this? Because there have been crossings, there have been, not a whole lot of them, but there have been changes of parties and stuff. And honestly, I'm not reflecting on anybody's not a criticism. But if you get elected to a political party, and it forms the government, and before the ink is dried on the register you have to sign when you come in as a member of the House of Assembly, you leave the party and give no, as Senator Cummings said in her thing, and you give no kind of real serious explanation. I mean, there are a lot of us who understand how these things work, but you give, and then you cross. If you take, the last person who crossed, at least he took 2 years, or whatever the thing was. But if you cross within weeks or days, and then you say that I'm forming the opposition, honestly, that, for any political party, political institution, public, whatever, it has to come across as a jarring thing. And I'm saying that we have to understand that these things subliminally send messages that can undermine institutions, norms, values, and as the AG would tell, conventions. We have to be very careful about that. We have to be very careful about that. I'm sure Senator Malinu would not want to hire anybody next week who comes into his business, and as soon as they get onboarded, they're gone to the competitors. They're gone through all of his things. He would say, well, what madness is this? We have to put things in place to bring some level of discipline to that. Yes, non-compete clauses, all kinds of things, and non-disclosure clauses, and all of this and all that, and that's in the private sector. But apparently, politicians, political parties, governments, administrations are not to do that, because you know why? Because there are people who see us as the rabble, we are not serious people. We can't be trusted. We are crooks and thieves and all that. And truthfully, politicians contribute a lot of that themselves too, because but that's a different view. But we have a responsibility to see ourselves seriously. And if we propose to be and put ourselves up as leaders in the society, then we have to ensure that we protect the integrity of the system, not just for now, but for the future. 4 more minutes. And so I guess I'm going to wrap up. Because this is important. And that is why this amendment I support. And this thing about conscience. You can't legislate conscience, you know. Don't care how much you could change 10 million constitutions. You can't legislate conscience. If I plan to come in here and say something, because my conscience tells me to say, I am going to say it. But if I feel that that collides with the philosophical position of the government, then I have a duty to separate myself from that government. I really do feel I have that responsibility. And I also have the responsibility to know under this amendment, but I'm not in the House, but I also have a responsibility to know that I was elected under the banner of a party who invested in me, who went out with me and become my colleagues. And therefore, I have a responsibility to them to go back, if I so want, to the polls and say, these are the reasons why I don't want to be associated with this lot anymore, and I am presenting myself as X, Y, or Z. Yeah? That's the whole thing. I've seen all these things. Senator Walters made a document in the House of the Bar Association, and I welcome the comments of the Bar Association. I didn't quite understand this thing about truncating debate. I don't know where that came from. I thought they should have taken advice before they wrote that. But that's just me, I'm not a lawyer. So I want to close, by saying that I support the amendment. I do not think it prevents anybody from representing their views. In fact, if we really look at it, one of our members in the lower house has expressed her views. And I don't think anybody is rushing to Robert Street to expel her. Be welcome. I speak quickly. Because and confidently too. There's nobody rushing to think.
You do the same thing you just
It's
described.
precisely. Because the same sin is that is it. I don't want to accuse it. But this is the point that I am making. This is not we have always had a convention. I tell you, a lot of this Westminster derivative politics is built on conventions. A lot of it is not legislated. It is built on convention. And we also have the convention of removing the whip. When people on matters of conscience, if you want to do, say, the death penalty, we remove the whip. And we allow people to express their view without having the party whip on them. That has been part of the convention of Westminster politics, Westminster and the derivatives which we have. So therefore, I don't know about this conscious thing. But I would close by saying, because I think my time is up. And I say this to Senator Rogers, because he too made a little comment that I found quite interesting. He said he heard about the last decade. He's now seeing members of the last in his cabinet and in the Senate. And I encourage him to believe every word of the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, and the Acts of the Apostles. Because Saul was persecuting the Christians. He preaches that every week. Because I watch St. George Parish Church routinely, and I listen to his sermons often. And so Saul was persecuting the Christians, and he had a road to Damascus experience, and he became Paul, and practically wrote half the New Testament. And so if I have found myself, in the Christians, I don't know what street. I don't in circular circumstances. Documents. Yes, but that is true too. But that is true too. And so I said to my good friend, don't worry about me. As you said, let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. I am obliged to you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Sinclair. We will now go online to take Senator Ryan Ford.
Good afternoon, Mr. President,
Ford.
fellow senators, and broader Barbados. Good afternoon. Obviously, I am traveling currently, so I do apologize I am not present with you. I wish to say that it is an honor to have this unexpected opportunity to sit in this Senate chamber, even though it's virtual. I'm indeed humble and grateful to the President of Barbados for his confidence in placing me here today. It is a position that I will never take for granted. This is a position as an independent senator mandated to serve the country regardless of my background, association, or family connections. It is my intention to do that and use my knowledge and experience, especially in tourism, sports, youth, even in areas of culture, and see how those decisions and offerings to obviously the Senate chamber will assist at how we affect change for all Barbadians. Today is the first day that I will have the opportunity to make my first contribution in this chamber as we debate the Constitution Amendment Bill for 2026 that is before us. There are very varying reasons why I am in support of the general idea around the amendment, and there are also other reasons as to why I would also prefer for further refinement of the amendment to reflect what Barbados as a constitution truly needs, especially as a new republic. It doesn't mean that we cannot revisit changes in the future as we are doing so today, and I'm sure many before us have done as well. And I'll be the first to say I am no specialist in legal jargon, nor wish to pretend to be. It is very difficult, and I would say this, and I'm sure for all the newcomers sitting in there today or that are online, it's very difficult for us to drown out the positions held by legal luminaries, economists, politicians, and of course, the most famous John Public. It's been interesting to hear the divergent views here today, and I would be lying if I were to say that I am not nervous in my approach and comments, as this is not the typical tourism or sporting space. I do not carry a legal nor political tone, nor do I carry a radio tone, as I would have heard my colleague, Senator Slocum, earlier today. I carry the tone of a 38-year-old, almost, Barbadian, who has always been preached to you that I am the future of tomorrow, and that you love Barbados. However, my reason comes from a place of understanding the meaning of support. And I believe that whether that comes from your constituents in this case, or in my world, your teammates or team members or other stakeholders, I therefore believe that one should face the electorate again if one wishes to switch for whatever reasons that might be. It would be, in my opinion, to be the correct thing after securing votes under the umbrella of one particular, well, in my world, a team, but in one particular party. A simple crossover to a new party, regardless of their motivation, cannot be right. And to me, it shows a total level of disrespect to supporters and makes a mockery of our voting system and commitment. It then leads people to speculate on the person's true motive as to why they left. What is it that they're after? Is it for gain? Is it for power? Is it for leadership? Is it for other things? And I also feel that the platform has been set by the great late Honourable Owen Seymour Arthur, who became an independent rather than angling to become the leader of the opposition, a move which we should not discredit from our history. After all, it is only our history that we can speak to. If he had chosen to do the complete opposite, then we as citizens may have been in a further position of voter apathy. If we take what has occurred in more recent times with the crossing of the floor, the impact that has been inflicted upon the ruling party and the opposition has been immense in two ways. In one way, you have people very upset with the feeling of distrust in the air because they have put their name, their voice, their energy, their support behind a representative of one party. And now you're being asked to either follow them blindly into another organization that you are not comfortable with, or support their replacement who they themselves may not agree with as well, because all along you were campaigning behind one individual. And all of a sudden your force is forced on you that you have to support another. However, secondly, it causes disruption in an opposition space. If that person is now to become the leader while party supporters or politicians of that party do not agree with it, it causes internal friction. So what happens to us, the regular John and Jane public, is that people lose faith and we also have less voter turnout. And any chance of an opposition or new government becomes a longer road, as we have seen. And that does not discredit what this current government has done to say that they have not done well or they've not done good or that the opposition has done poorly. But we are all privy to what has occurred over the last couple of years, and we cannot hide from it. We cannot run from it. My actual office is just down the street from the opposition, the main opposition's office, their headquarters. And of course, we are well aware of what may have occurred. Then people also begin a rumor mill, and they start calling persons names, as is typical once you expose yourself to civic duty, and I'm sure that I will get many, if not many before, have as well. Opposition leaders are called names, they're called all sorts of acronyms, as we have seen in the last campaign, and something that my generation does not care anything for at all. You have two skin teeth and a laugh, and you move on. Or they start to discredit a prime minister or ministers. Whether you vote for them or not, they're representatives of our beloved country and ourselves. So there's a fraction of distrust and rise of anger that filters into society more than it ever was before. You must read the comments on social media. You must go to a social gathering, a social line, a sporting event. I would tell you, go to football, cricket, road tennis, listen to how people talk about what has occurred over the last 10 years or so. These are now the heartbeat and feeling of our society. It's not the newspaper, and it's no discredit to the newspapers because they do their work. But now society now is talking and spreading what they think more so than a media channel. It's now in person, way more than it ever was before, and it's much more louder than a choir in itself. So the decisions that we actually make in here today inside of the Senate chamber as well as Parliament on a general are way bigger of an impact on our society and the future generations to come on the outside than they are actually the impact on the inside of these walls. And again, as I said, I am not a legal nor political guru. 2 weeks ago, I was just like many of you outside who are listening and following. I was enjoying all of the political arguments, regardless of sides, whether it's in person or online, or if I go to football or water polo, and you have friends there talking and you want to get into the conversation, or it's over WhatsApp or social media. You're reading the manifestos, you're trying to understand arguments. You don't support everything of one party, and you don't argue against everything from one party. But you look at where we are as a country and you tell yourself what it is that you want and need for Barbados. Because when all of these arguments are done, as most of the public has always said, we're all friends outside of the wall. But friendship does not stop what the impact that comes from what is decided inside the wall can occur. And now I am in a place that demands my civic duty and exposes me even further. So I expect there will be individuals in the public forum who do not share my views, but that is what a democratic society permits. In my entire life, many of you who know me know that I will speak my mind freely. I do see some of the ministers and senators as well as some in the back listening, and they know this very well. But I would always do it respectfully, And we as a people spend many valuable years being keyboard warriors, philosophical architects, closed group negative Nancy's that sometimes are very negative, and also passenger prince and princesses, because we don't wish to be targeted for our true feelings, and most of all, fear for retaliation. What I say here today is not to say that you are wrong and strong, as many a grandparent would tell you. Many a close friend would tell me all the time, Ryan, you are something else, and I will always respond with, I'm glad I'm not the same thing as everyone else. However, we cannot continuously do things the same way or act the same way for individual desires, but if we are lending our time and health towards civic duty on behalf of Barbados and our people, then we must make decisions for the betterment of Barbados. And we must also admit where we have not done something right in the past and move swiftly to correct it. Most of the Constitution is done such a long time ago. And I will openly say maybe 99% of Barbadians don't even know what is written in the Constitution in itself, but will go on a radio program, will go on social media, will go on the blog or to a cricket match, etc., and quote, oh, the Constitution, they're just trying to use the Constitution, or let's change the Constitution, or let's not do this and that. But that is for a longer discussion when we get to the estimates, when we start to speak to education reform and what it is that we need to educate our people with and what we need to take away. So I step boldly forward to give my time, and I wish to ask all members of government, opposition members, and independent senators from the private sector like myself and the faith-based organizations that we have an opportunity with the new formation of a republic to create a constitution that reflects not just 2026 today, but to design it with the flexibility to pivot change with the changing environments that are around us, and do so by putting Barbados and Bajans first for the future. And in closing, Mr. President, I admit that my decision weighed on me heavily, especially last night into this morning, as it is my first entrance into this chamber. It weighed on me that as much as we made this decision for the benefit on this one topic today, I am a young Bajan, and I ask that going forward that we collectively review the entire Constitution alongside the public, and we design what works for all Barbados in its entirety rather than by individual clauses or chapters. And in nature, and from hearing government and opposition speakers speak today, the intention of this bill amendment is not 100% wrong, nor is it 100% right. We may never get 100% at all, but we can definitely make improvements that protect us all. So in my opinion, we as a people spend way too much time arguing or promoting the idea that individuals who step forward for civic duty are doing such for personal gain and for power. There's no way for us to love Barbados and move Barbados forward, hence why we sometimes run ourselves in circles and progress is sometimes delayed at snail pace. So I'm not sure about my colleagues in the Senate, but I wish to see further progress in my lifetime, and that is for sure. We must remember that we are the Republic of Barbados, a strong and proud nation, and we must rebuild and re-energize it together. So I wish to say thank you for the opportunity to present my views. I look forward to contributing more meaningfully during the estimates response in a few weeks on areas that I specialize in, as well as areas I have a keen interest in, and on behalf of all Barbadians. I'm obliged to you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Ford. Thank you very much. Her Honor, Senator Thompson.
Mr. President, sir, I am grateful to honorable members for having re-elected me, and particularly pleased to be so close to God. To God's representative, sir. I'm very much hoping that we will be able to pray for each other. I wish to congratulate all those new senators and to welcome you to being participants in what is a robust and mature democracy, and to hope that you will enjoy your time in this chamber and your time by extension in this political existence. I am particularly pleased to welcome the women. I know it is much more difficult for women to serve at this level, to get here, to stay here. And I will support all of you, even if not all of your positions, because I do promise to be vigorous in my resistance of that which my party will not support. Indeed, I'm happy to work with all members, but I do in particular congratulate and welcome the women and will support them in a very special way. I want to congratulate in particular Senator Slocum on what I thought was a very good maiden speech. This is an interesting way to start a new term, with a constitutional debate, with a debate that has, or an issue that has excited attention in the heights and the terraces, in the gaps and the alleys, and the lanes and the lines, by the rum shops and the kiosks and vending places and the bus stand and across our nation in people's drawing rooms and in high places and low places. It is really a question of what does our democracy represent? And there were many questions asked this evening, some of which I have every intention of answering, and there are questions that have not been asked. But it occurs to me that at the core of this particular debate is really the extension of our democracy rather than the restriction of our democracy, and that the measure before the chamber actually enhances the rights of electors. Because in all of this debate about political parties, people have not focused on what it is a member of the electorate expects when they walk into a polling station and puts their X by your name. Now, much has been made of the fact that political parties do not appear on ballot papers in Barbados. And that has to do with the simple fact that the level of literacy in Barbados is so high that there is no need for a political party symbol, because the vast majority of people walking into the polling booth can read and know who they are voting for and which party they are voting for. Equally, there has been considerable debate over the fact that political parties are entities unknown to the Constitution and unknown to the laws of Barbados. They are. But political realities are the foundation and basis of our institutional, political, of our architecture in politics, and the mechanism through which policy is delivered, and the mechanism through which people face the electorate in the majority and come to be elected in this country. It is a fact of law and a principle of law that language takes on the common meaning. And therefore, when you say political party in Barbados, it is an animal that everybody knows. If you see a dog, you know a dog. If you see a cat, you know a cat. If you see a political party, you are able to identify it. You are able to discern between the pop-up political parties that we saw in the last election. You are able to make a distinction between those that were associations of or coalitions of convenience. You knew when a person turned up in a blue shirt who they represented, and you know if they came in red, who was the body that they appeared on behalf of. And if you don't believe that there is such a thing as a political party, I invite you to go to George Street in a red shirt and sit down in a meeting, and you will find out if a political party exists or not. A political party is an entity known to the electorate and known to the general public of Barbados. So the fact that this uses language which is outside legal definition does not make it a legal wrong, because it is a social institution, and Senator Sinclair was right, of great, considerable antiquity within the context of our Constitution, within the context of Barbados' social organization, and within the context of our political structure. The Barbados Labour Party is over 80 years old. I don't know how long the Democratic Labour Party is, but it has to be at least maybe 70, 60 or so. So these are our institutions that have been around for a long time, and Senator Sinclair is right, they have made considerable contribution. En passant, I want to just make the point that people are repeating about voter apathy. The electorate, as I understand it, was identified by the EBC as 223,000 people, roughly, and the size of the population as 273. 115,593 people voted. Two things are relevant here. One, if you look at the number of votes polled, you will see that insofar as there is apathy, it is within the members of the Democratic Labour Party whose supporters are not coming out and voting. That is the reality. That in a general election, a Democratic Labour Party candidate can poll less than 1,000 votes, tells you in a constituency previously represented by somebody who is now their leader, and that the leader could not influence people in that constituency to vote for his own candidate, tells you that this is a party that is without serious support. And we talk in politics about a leader having coattails. The reality is that in the last general election, the leader of the Democratic Labour Party was proven not even to have a bow tie, not even the length of a bow tie, furthermore coattails on which anybody else could ride. And we have to be concerned about the extent to which the Democratic Labour Party has gotten into self-cannibalization, and the extent to which they are failing to inculcate the lessons that the public has been trying to teach them, and are still doubling down on narratives that the public has repeatedly rejected and said we do not want. And they need to stop saying that money beat them and privilege beat them and all these kinds of stories that have nothing to do with Mary Jones from Hall's Village, who went out to place her ex next to the Barbados Labour Party because she had no other choice, a choice not given to her. She did not feel that she could vote for her traditional party, the Democratic Labour Party. And therefore, several of their members, as is evident from the low turnout for them as counted by votes, that the Democratic Labour Party vote stayed at home. The Barbados Labour Party is not responsible for that. The second thing about these numbers is that if, in fact, there are 273,000 people in the population, then it stands to reason that there probably are not 223,000 people as registered electors. The numbers are terribly wrong. And therefore, when we talk about low voter turnout, we are premising it on a number that is incorrect And we do not have a genuine understanding of what the turnout is. In fact, the turnout was considerably higher than the numbers suggest, because there's a 50,000 people in their discrepancy that we have to identify. Many members of parliament, many candidates speak about 1,000 and 2,000 circulars coming back to constituency offices because the people could not be found. So when people talk about the electorate and they do a percentage of the vote vis-a-vis what they think the electorate is constituted of in terms of numbers, the conclusions to which they are coming are very wrong. I just want to say this en passant. I turn my attention, therefore, sir, to another matter, and it is this. What are we doing today? I have heard a lot about the coercion of political parties, and you won't be free to speak, and people can't express opinions freely and so on. Most political parties do not lock out their members for having alternative views. Let's start there. There is far more rational behavior in serious political parties in Barbados than that. And we have heard in the last term, in the term before, I have expressed views in here that run counter to a BLP position. I've gotten up and said, but the government needs to do X, Y, or Z. Or so-and-so is a failing at which they need to look. Or this legislation stops short of what the country or society requires. Now, I'm not an elected parliamentarian, but we have heard parliamentarians in the other place, the representative for Christchurch East, the representative for St. Philip, several other parliamentarians have gotten up and expressed virulent dissent with the party's positions without attracting any censure, any ire, any public disapprobation, or any kind of punishment at all. So the notion that the Barbados Labour Party is rushing to bring legislation that instead of punishing people, or that they want to use the legislation to punish and oust people, is absolutely false. I would remind the public that these candidates who were elected are people who the party ran and consciously ran, knowing their personality traits, knowing that they were apt to criticize, knowing that some may call them difficult. People, they were run as candidates in the last election. So the notion that somehow the party wants to punish these people is really quite false. Let us understand, therefore, what is the fundamental functioning of a political party in government. You have backbenchers, people who are elected as members of parliament, and the general public speaks about ministers and MPs interchangeably. They do not necessarily understand the difference. You have persons who are elected. Everybody in the lower chamber is elected, 30 people. Some of those will become ministers. They are called the cabinet. Some who do not become ministers will sit on what is called the backbench. It means that they are not on the minister, they're not on the front bench. The cabinet carries out the manifesto, decisions, and policy of the government of Barbados and makes that decision sitting collectively with the Prime Minister, who is primus inter pares, first among equals. Once the cabinet agrees to a policy or initiative, it comes here as legislation, it is announced, it is executed. A cabinet member having sat and agreed on a policy is responsible jointly with the other members of cabinet for the approval, implementation, execution, and the public explanation of that policy. They cannot depart from it. So that this legislation does not require or impose a standard or rule that does not already exist. That is a failing that is not a reality that is not being discussed in the public domain. Cabinet members, of whom there are now about 20 or so, 20 something, cabinet members cannot dissent from policy, full stop. If you were, as a cabinet member, to get up and repudiate the government's policy, you would immediately be liable to sanction. Whether the government or the party chooses to carry out that sanction would be another matter, but you would already have placed yourself at peril of punishment. A backbencher, under these rules, is open to disagree openly with cabinet policy and cabinet decisions, and can say so on the floor of Parliament without fear of sanction or censure. The party whip, we hear a lot about the party whip. A party whip has two meanings. A party whip is a person who has the responsibility for gathering government's members. Sweet boy, you're not dressed appropriately for the occasion. Government's policy is XYZ. We expect you to support government's policy. The business of Parliament will be conducted at such and such a time. We expect you to be on time for members for this sitting. We expect that parliamentary group will meet all day on Saturday and half day on Sunday to discuss the estimates. You will be expected to come prepared to discuss the areas in which you have interest. The party whip sees about government's policy and government's business and ensures that members of the government vote on government's policy when it is presented. On matters of conscience, or in some matters, a backbencher will have latitude to say what they want, to vote how they want. But on constitutional matters, there is no such freedom. Let us be absolutely clear. The legislation before the chamber today does not change any of that. It doesn't bring any new force, any new penalties, any new punishments than already exists in essence. So that a lot of the angst that people are feeling or maybe expressing is really imagined from a misappreciation of what the rules now say. Let us go on. So the whip is responsible for discipline generally. The whip as the person. You speak about the whip being on. In that case, what you are saying is that on this matter, a conscience vote is not allowed. The policy matter requires a strict party line vote. And you are expected to toe the party line, full stop. This already exists. Members of Parliament come to Parliament knowing that they are constrained by these realities and these rules. Why now? Why today? Well, in 2018 we had a defection. In 2022 we had a defection. Are we supposed to wait? No. I mean, why not now? Would you wait until the middle of the term? Would you wait till it happens? This is an appropriate time at the beginning of the term to set the discipline under which we are going to be operating. And that discipline says, if you come into the party, there are certain expectations that we have and certain expectations that the public has, and I'm going to get to those. Sorry? Oh, okay. The legislation gives to the court the right to intervene, to make changes, and to effect remedies if a process is breached, if you were to use the Barbadian word unfaired, or if something was done that represents some injustice in relation to you and what happens should there be an attempt to expel you. Now, the legislation attempts to make a seat vacant where an individual does not follow the party whip or where the individual crosses the floor. And I want to deal with this matter of crossing the floor. When you are elected by individuals. You go representing a particular party, which has a manifesto, except if you're the Democratic Labour Party and you present it 3 days or 2 days before the election. It is taken that the party will have a manifesto. It will have a policy position, and members of the electorate are voting on that. Our elections have become presidential contests. So people are looking at leader A and leader B and either accepting or rejecting one leader or the other. They are looking at the teams and saying, man, I like these people here bad. I like how they talk. I like the fact that does do this or does do that. Or I don't like the platform of the other side. So that when a person is elected, they are elected having run under a particular leader, under a particular party banner, with a particular platform, with a particular policy set, promoting a particular agenda, and critically using the party's resources, financial, human, skills, technologies, all of that to get elected. And the people who voted for you vote for you on the basis of all of the things that I said: leader, manifesto, policy agenda. And the people who canvassed for you are the members of a particular political organization who are critically making an effort to ensure your election. Hence, there is an expectation when you are elected by a person, when you are elected by a constituency, that you will carry that party's positions, that you will continue to use that person's resources, that you will fall under the leader that they wanted to lead them and the country, that you will be part of a party structure that they approve of, that your policy agenda will be the policy agenda for which they voted. If you decide that you no longer want to vote or be part of that political structure, then by all means let your seat be vacated, and please, there is nothing to stop you when the seat is vacated. A by-election has to be called. You can run as an independent. You can run as a member of any political party in Barbados. You can run as a member of the opposition or the very people you were opposing during the election. You can run again. And if the people who elected you want you, they are at liberty to re-elect you. So the party is saying, you are no longer carrying my banner and agenda. You refuse to identify with my policy positions. And therefore, I am putting you out. You go out there and do your own thing. Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. There are parents who say to children, listen, boy, when you want to live in my house, you got to live by my rules. And people in here don't smoke weed. We don't do that. You want to do that, you go outside. It is a similar sort of thing. The Barbados Labour Party is saying, we are starting this term by making it clear that if you want to exist outside of our political structure, no problem. Go ahead and do so. Run for whomever you wish, whenever you wish, however you wish, and let the public endorse you again as their parliamentary representative. And that has happened. Richie Haynes managed to be re-elected after he left the Democratic Labour Party, and Richard Beyer and so on. So it has happened. It has happened in other Caribbean countries. So that we are not, the Barbados Labour Party is not imposing any harsh rules or measures that offend democracy. It is defending and supporting the right of an elector to have the leader, policy, party, and agenda and the expectation for which they voted at the time of the election. You cannot tell me that you ran for a party in March, or March 5th, and by March 17th, you are leaving the party because you have some big philosophical divide, something other than not getting a ministry or not getting what you expected. So nobody in the Barbados Labour Party is going to be punished for speaking their mind, punished for anything else. Mr. President, I have a particular interest in this because it was one of my minority opinions in the Parliamentary Reform Commission. I felt very strongly, and I went counter to the rest of the commission, which held the view that people should be allowed to cross the floor. I believe, for the reasons that I articulated during the course of my comments today, that people should not be allowed to cross the floor and remain elected. Seek a new mandate from the public, and if the public wants you, then they will re-elect you. I said at the time, in my opinion, that I think that the seat should be vacated within 90 days, and that a period should be allowed for the country to go into by-election and to have the by-election. I want just to deal perhaps with one more point before I come to closure. There has been discussion, not in here, but in the other place. And sir, I think I've answered the other question that was asked today. What is the mischief that we have sought to address? The mischief that we have sought to address is the abuse of a political entity and the electorate who expected you to remain with the party under whose mandate you came to them. That is the mischief. There has been a suggestion that this matter was rushed in here today when nobody expected, rushed in the lower house, and somebody didn't have enough time to consider it and to ask questions. Mr. President, sir, I don't like sophistry. I don't like people being disingenuous. The report of the Parliamentary Reform Commission, which dealt with this matter, was laid in the House on May 27th, 2025, nearly a year ago. So every sitting member of Parliament, particularly those now saying that they didn't have adequate time, had more than adequate time if they were interested in doing their work or in the people's business to read the report, digest it, and address the issues within the context of the party structure. I go further, sir. The Honourable Senator Cummins made the point that it bothers me that I feel myself pushed to do this. The Honourable Senator Cummins made the point that the Barbados Parliamentary Group, Barbados Labour Party Parliamentary Group, meets every Monday evening. All members of Parliament are invited. Mr. President, sir, I can say to you and to the public of Barbados, because this needs to be known, because somebody is now being held up of a paragon of right resistance. The Parliamentary Reform Report was put before the Parliamentary Party. There were 3 or 4 extraordinary meetings of the Parliamentary Party to deal with the measures and the recommendations of the report. Every member of Parliament had an opportunity to speak to these matters at length. As somebody who sat on the Parliamentary Reform Commission and in my capacity as Deputy President, I was invited to speak to and present. So I spoke to and presented not only the entire report, but spent particular time on my minority opinions and why I spoke in a way different that was to the other members of the commissions. So it is entirely inaccurate, sir. The rules do not permit me to say untrue. It is entirely inaccurate that there was no adequate time to consider this matter and that it was being rushed and forced on members when in fact for well over a year the parliamentary group of the Barbados Labour Party has been considering this matter and its positions on the matter both at the personal and at the party level. And I'm deeply, deeply concerned that I could see in the public domain something contrary to this and a suggestion that this matter was being rushed without giving persons who were members of parliament before. I can see that new senators may say that they were not as familiar with it, but certainly, sir, nobody who was a parliamentarian for any considerable time could say under Barbados Labour Party that this is all new to them, because there was very intense, very extensive, pronounced discussion within the context of the party structure. And people had an opportunity to either support or disagree and not to ambush and refuse to vote on the floor of Parliament when a matter that they well knew the details of came up. Sir, I do not. It pains me. I started by supporting the women in this chamber, and I have always, because I know what it has taken me to serve as a female parliamentarian in the lower chamber, and I regret that on principle, I really have to put this in the public domain, because I cannot let somebody appear as a champion of truth on resistance when the entirety of what they said was built on an inaccuracy. And it troubles me deeply, and I do not like it. And I do not like to see it, and I will not condone it, and I will not let it pass. Sir, you are asking me to come to closure. I heard that. Sir, so having circled around the issues and having dealt with it, I conclude on a point that I think is important. A lot of the debate that I've heard has centered on some deep distrust of politicians, that somehow, because this legislation exists, there will now be some sort of political bloodletting that could not have occurred before. Sir, as I started by saying, the legislation basically just codifies what is part of the existing practice under Westminster with a party whip. And you know, and must know as a parliamentarian, that there are times when you are expected to give support to and follow the policies and the positions of your party, and you know when it is a conscience vote and that you are free to disagree entirely. Now, there was a time, Mr. President, sir, when there was a 14-16 result in an election. If you did not have a party whip to maintain policy and party positions, a government could have collapsed entirely. But today you heard arguments about what instability is Barbados, and as Barbados is such a stable democracy. Sir, I wish to point out that this is not a mischief. It did not come here for political expediency or because the Barbados Labour Party is under threat. It came as a matter of policy and political principle, that it is a fact that every time somebody jumps ship, it does create instability with the electorate, with their electors, with the persons who needed their representation, with the people who feel a sense of disappointment and betrayal. And it creates, in the instance where you have a close, and you cannot anticipate all human behavior, you cannot expect to legislate for every permutation, but certainly you have to anticipate what is possible. And this legislation speaks to a situation where if you had a close Parliament, 1614, as happened in the past, where ministers and members of Parliament could not travel because government could not get votes to do its business, that there has to be a situation where you must be able as a political party and a government to prevent the collapse of the party, the collapse of the government, and throwing the country into a period of political instability. Mr. President, sir, I am compelled, for all the reasons that I've given here today, and not because I'm under the whip, to support my position as given in the minority in the Parliamentary Reform Commission, and to support this legislation today. I'm much obliged, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Her Honor, Senator, the Most Honourable Henrietta Elizabeth Thompson. Senator Cummins.
I am obliged today, not just to the honourable senators who have all spoken, but to the richness of today's debate. We've had a robust discussion and we've had multiple perspectives. It has most certainly not been an echo chamber in this honourable chamber today. But for the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time in this chamber or online, it is my custom as the party whip for the Barbados Labour Party and the leader of government business in this chamber to take a moment to respond to the things that have been raised and to attempt to address any concerns that have been raised. Now, Senator Walters may have been unintentionally, because I do not wish to impute improper motive, unintentionally misleading the chamber in his presentation. He began his presentation by speaking under correction by the president thereafter about tinkering with the Constitution between 2018 and now. And in all instances, based on what was being described, it was not in the interest of people. Mr. President, I want to draw your attention to, yes, the additional constitutional amendments that were made during the course of 2018 and now. One of those constitutional amendments, Mr. President, was the removal of the mandatory imposition of the death penalty to ensure that our Constitution correlated with the decisions of the Caribbean Court of Justice. We also made, Mr. President, amendments to the Bail Act. We made amendments to the bail laws specifically to treat to anti-terrorism measures. And most significantly, Mr. President, I believe the very last thing that was done in this chamber before we rose prior to the election was a slew of public service appointments, Mr. President, that brought a level of automaticity in public service appointments. That was the last constitutional amendment that this chamber did. So Senator Walters may have forgotten, and so I'm going to attribute that assumption to him, that he may have forgotten those constitutional amendments. But I also want to go a little bit further, Mr. President. This administration under the Barbados Labour Party between 2018 and now has had more sittings, perhaps in the first term, than the previous government had in 10 years. And so now, yes, in the other place for sure, simply because of the sheer volume of legislation generally that came through this parliament, Mr. President. So there's no question about that. Now, the bill that was withdrawn, I believe the honourable member spoke about, was about making sure that we had a youth presence and to have a person who was eligible to vote but not eligible to sit in the chamber at the time. And on consultation with members who sit around the table, a decision was made that we could not muster the supporting number of votes required, and so the bill was withdrawn. However, I am pleased that we have members of the League of Young Socialists represented here on the Barbados Labour Party side and who themselves represent the young vote. So, Mr. President, I want to say that I believe that Senator, our Deputy President, has already thoroughly spoken to the question of Constitutional Reform Commission and the Parliamentary Reform Commission, and that it is a minority opinion. I have to say, though, however, that beyond those two things, I can't think of much else that Senator Walters said that I can respond to. Now, Senator Rogers, I believe that Senator Thompson also raised many of the issues. Now, I want to put something here in context. Crossing the floor, and Senator Sinclair also made this point, crossing the floor is not changing political allegiance. They're two separate things. Ronnie Yearwood, yes, the debacle of George Street. Ronnie Yearwood was not a member of the other place. He was not a sitting MP when he was expelled. And so he had no seat and no constituents who had elected him to sit in high office. And so that was a distinction that we had to make. And so, Mr. President, when we talk about then Senator Goodridge, when she speaks about persons not being I think it was Senator Walters said there was no riot in Christchurch South. There was no revolt in Christchurch South. Mr. President, I sat here aghast. Honestly, I did. And I sat here aghast really because we are talking about people in an electoral process. Is it to say that we as a people are comfortable with the idea that a person can be elected and then vanish from the electoral constituency that voted for them for a number of years, and because there was no burning of tires, blocking of streets, protests in the streets, that persons were not disadvantaged? Is that what we're saying in a modern context? What about the persons who, never mind whether they sat in Parliament and shouted from the mountaintops for 12 hours and said much of nothing or not? Never mind that. Never mind that. What happens to the old lady who needs help from a constituency representative who was abandoned for 2+ years? That does not need a riot. That just needs heart and it needs conscience. And anyone who does not see that as a distinction between political instability and what the importance of democracy must represent should not be in the other place. And perhaps that is a clear indication of why persons are here and not in the other place today. Now, Mr. President, I want to commend young Senator Slocum for his maiden contribution. He articulated not just his presentation coming as a person who has worked across the region with political parties and understands political structures, someone who is young himself and understands what other persons are saying, and someone who hears the responses of persons calling in on the radio with concerns, and I want to commend him for his comments. Senator Malalu, in his presentation, and I sent to my car to get a copy of the Barbados Labour Party manifesto and the Red Record. This is not a government that has come into office for the first time. This is a government that has been the government. And so therefore, Mr. President, when we talk about the first order priorities, the new global order, there is a Minister of Foreign Affairs for that. When we speak about crime, there is an Attorney General, there is a Minister of Legal Affairs and responsible for the police for that. When we speak about public sector reform, there is a minister with responsibility for the public service with responsibility for that. Those are not legislative matters, and they continue every single day in the day-to-day administration of the government. That's not what we come here to do on a day-to-day basis. That's the difference between the work of a cabinet and the work of a parliament. They're two separate things. And the Barbados Labour Party manifesto of 2026, a covenant of which we are very proud, with the signatures of all of our members, outlines very clearly what our priorities are. It includes every last one of the things that have been listed here, from tax measures, facilitation, what the provisions were for inviting investment into the country and offering concessions, and of course healthcare. All of these things are policy matters. They're not in and of themselves legislative matters, and so they remain the priorities of the government. They're the things we campaigned on. And so they don't necessarily need to be the first thing we bring to the parliament because they were the first things we brought to the government. by way of a manifesto. And the reason why persons were able to identify what those things were that we stood for was because, unlike others, we presented a manifesto. We were very clear as to what we stood for. We gave people adequate time to be able to review what we stood for. But because we were also not a new government, because we had a record on which we had to stand, we brought a red record. What have we done? What is in train? What is proposed? What has been done? That was the Barbados Labour Party way, Mr. President. Now, Senator Sinclair gave a masterclass, followed by yet another masterclass, one in political theory, one in political history, and one in politics and history. Mr. President, the Honourable Deputy President is absolutely right. Those of us who were in the last parliamentary party, I remember it well. It was more than once. We met on a Saturday. In the first instance, and I know because I was a scribe, and then sent Madam Deputy my scribbled notes. And I met Senator, who would have been Senator Chantal Monroe Knight. No, the Honourable Chantal Monroe Knight. We took careful notes of the recommendations of the Parliamentary Reform Commission. We shared them with Madam Deputy President because she was the representative and she facilitated our meetings. And every member of the parliamentary group had the opportunity, because they were invited to be there, to go through not one, not some, and not others, every single item. It was a laborious process. And so I cannot say, as a member of the Barbados Labour Party parliamentary group since 2018 and since the Parliamentary Reform Commission report was completed, that I had not had any time to go over what was the minority opinion. Moreover, I cannot say, as a member of the Barbados Labour Party parliamentary group, and having led the debate on the report of the PRC in this chamber after it came from the other place, I cannot say that I did not know what the proposals were, and I had not had enough time. They were more than adequately ventilated in this Barbados Labour Party, as could have been the case with any other political party, because they were made public. Now, Senator Goodridge made a number of points about freedom of association. Nothing in this legislation prevents persons from having freedom of association. There's nothing in this legislation that prevents a person from dissenting. And I believe we've heard, even in the Barbados Labour Party, the government who has presented this proposal, that we have members who dissent all the time. All the time. In the other place, there are members who dissent. In this place, we have had it. I remember when I was a senator, sitting where Senator Benjamin is sitting, there were bills that came here. I was not a member of cabinet, but I wasn't so sure how I felt about them. And I either didn't speak until I understood what it was about, or there were instances where I raised queries and asked for more to be done to address specific concerns. Mr. President, the role of the party whip also means that if you have a concern, it's like when you're in a family, when you're home. If I have a problem with you, I am going down the road and telling the neighbor before I come and tell you. I am going to use the access that I have internal to my household, and I'm going to raise what my concerns are, and I'm going to interrogate what the responses are, and then I will come to a conclusion. That's the Barbados Labour Party way. And we have robust discussions in parliamentary group. We have these discussions on significant matters where the Prime Minister goes around the table and around the room, person by person by person. In cabinet, it happens on critical matters as well. Around the table, what say you? What's your position? And the collective responsibility of cabinet applies, yes, but you have the opportunity to robustly discuss and to ventilate what your concerns are. So dissent is not frowned on, not at all. So I want to assure Senator Goodridge that there's nothing here that breaches or infringes on the constitutional right of association, the constitutional right to, well, there's no constitutional right, but your right to dissent as an individual, to have your own opinion. Nothing at all. That does not arise in this legislation. And I can assure you that moving quietly and rushing cannot be that a parliamentary commission report since however long ago, even with a minority opinion before us, has been ventilated in the public domain, and the government has made a determination as to how they will proceed with the recommendations. It cannot be rushed. And then I know, because we have persons who are new, I want to give you the assurance that typographical errors are the kinds of things that the Law Review Commission exists to address. You will always have those kinds of things appearing in legislation. Before a piece of legislation is finalized, it is scrubbed by way of the Law Review Commission. They address things like what is the ordinary meaning, full stops, those kinds of things, as long as they're not substantive. So that is neither here nor there. And I want to thank, finally, Senator Ryan Ford, who we know is traveling, but has taken the time and shown the interest and the commitment by not only remaining online, but also by speaking from online. So, Mr. President, those would be the responses that I would share to the queries that have been raised and the comments that have been made. And I want to commend once more this bill to the Honourable Chamber, and I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Thank you, Senator Thompson. Senator Cummins. The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is accordingly read a second time. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honour do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Honourable Senate resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Honourable, the Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that Clause 1 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 3 do now stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the President the passage of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The chairman has reported the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye?
Aye.
Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Senator Cummins. Yeah. No, you have to move the passing.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as a Constitution Amendment Act 2026.
Before I hand over to the clerk, this being the Constitution bill, we will take a individual vote. Let me just ask those senators who are online, we will change the configuration, but you need to have your cameras on so we can see you as you take your vote and your call by the clerk of Parliament. We just ring the bell to ensure that all those who are within hail are able to join us for the vote.
Senator Cummins.
Aye.
Senator, the most honorable Mr. Walker, who's coming in online.
Aye.
Senator
Aye.
Sickler. Aye. Senator Reid.
Aye.
Senator Archer.
Aye.
Senator King.
Aye.
Senator Trim.
Aye.
Senator Allen, who's coming in online.
Aye.
Senator Benjamin.
Aye.
Senator Odom.
Aye.
Her Honor, Senator the Most Honorable Elizabeth Thompson.
Aye.
Senator Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers.
No.
Senator Malalu, who is coming in online.
Aye.
Senator Dr. Kenneth Connell, who's coming in online.
Abstain.
Senator Nels.
Aye.
Senator Redmond.
Aye.
Senator Ford, who's coming in online.
Aye. Abstain.
Senator Slocum.
Aye.
Senator Walters.
No.
Senator Goodrich.
No. No.
12, 13, 14, 15. 3 noes and 2 abstentions.
He knows.
1, 2, 3 noes, yeah. And 2 abstentions.
Mr. President, the results of the division is as follows. 15 honorable senators voted in favor. 3 honorable senators voted against. And there were 2 abstentions. The 2/3 majority as required by the Constitution has been reached.
Thank you very much, honorable members. You've heard the result of the vote. The bill is met with 2/3 majority is required, and therefore declare that this bill has been passed and is cited as the Constitution Amendment Act of 2026. Senator Cummins.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This concludes government business for today, and I beg to move that this sitting of the Senate be adjourned sine die.
The question is that Honourable the Senate will now adjourn sine die. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The ayes have it. Senate is accordingly adjourned sine die.